I'm going to apologize in advance. If you hear anything in the background that sounds like snoring, that is Harley. She is passed out over here, and she's just a few feet from you guys, and she's been snoring at different times throughout this reading. So I do apologize, but get you a drink, kick back, relax. This is a long one, but I hope you guys really enjoy it. I'm going to read it until the very end. And all right, let's get on with it. Bye. The finale of So This Is Love, a Twisted Tale series. What if Cinderella never tried on the glass slipper? Chapter 27. It was barely dawn when someone rapped on Cinderella's door. So loudly she shot up from her bed. Good morning, Madam. Get up and get dressed, Hermina said, cutting her off. Stray curls dangled over her face. For the first time, the mistress of the household's hair was not impeccably arranged. There's to be another ball tonight, and we need every pair of hands working. Don't stand there gaping. That includes you, Cinderella. Another ball? Charles had been true to his word. He would announce his intention to marry her tonight. Cinderella dressed, her fingers shaking with excitement as she loosened her braids, pinned on her wig, and wrapped her lavender sash around her waist. A twinge of nervousness made her stomach flutter. After that night's ball, she would be a princess. I need to tell Louisa before she hears it from someone else. A distressed Madame Ermina surveyed the long line of young women under her supervision. Cinderella hurried to her place at the end, but not before waving to Louisa, who'd made it to the roll call just in time. Another party, Ermina grumbled. Why do we even bother to take down the decorations? She spun to face the girls. When you have received your assignments, get to work immediately. One by one, the girls received their duties. When it was Cinderella's turn, Madame Ermina crossed her arms. Why the smile? Are you actually happy that we all have to scrub the palace floors again? Or are you simpering like a fool because you think you won't have to do your share of the cleaning? No, ma'am, Cinderella stuttered. Then? Nothing. Cinderella struggled to wipe the joy from her face. Failing miserably, her expression only brightened. It's just a beautiful day outside, isn't it? A wonderful day for dancing. All that perfumed air upstairs is addling your wits, Ermina narrowed her eyes. The Duchess asked me to give you the morning off, but it seemed you need to learn your place. Your duty isn't only to the Duchess, it's to me too. Report to the kitchens. The maids need help with the dishes. At the dismissal, Cinderella let out a great exhale, then hurried to change her uniform. Where were you last night? Louisa asked, joining her by the cabinet. I came by to pick up the gown, but you weren't in your room. Cinderella swallowed. Where does she even begin? Misreading her reaction, Louisa grinned. Ah, you were with that boy from the masquerade, weren't you? I want to hear everything about it. Everything. But first, I have news. News? I heard the princess found the mystery princess, she said, lowering her voice as the two girls shuttled from the servants' quarters to their posts. Everyone says he's going to propose to her at the ball. Figured the romantic in you might enjoy that. Cinderella's heart thudded in her ears. Where did you hear that? For one, the glass slipper is not in its case outside the palace anymore. And Louisa waved an envelope in front of her face. This! Didn't you get one of these? No, what is that? A letter from the prince himself. Everyone's to get an increase in wages after the ball, and a holiday. The royals don't just declare a holiday for no reason. It must be because there's going to be a royal wedding. Oh, you must have gotten one. Check your room. But Cinderella was certain she hadn't gotten one, and it was time she told her friend why. Louisa, she began. She didn't get a chance to say more. Madame Ermina called for her in her strident voice, and Louisa's aunt inserted herself between the two girls. The Duchess wishes to see you, Cinderella, she said, her brows furrowed with confusion. She asks that you not wear your palace uniform and that you meet her in the salon at once. Dressed in the only clothes she owned, the shirt and skirt she had worn when she escaped her stepmother's home, Cinderella approached the Duchess's chambers with trepidation. If Genevieve had given Cinderella the morning off, why would she summon her back to her room? Well, in any case, this would be the perfect time to tell the Duchess that she was the runaway girl from the ball and had accepted Prince Charles's proposal of marriage. She gathered her courage, rehearsing the words in her head. Once the doors opened, and overjoyed Bruno barked, racing to greet Cinderella. Forgetting her restraint, she was bending down to massage his ears when a stern voice spoke over them. "Bruno, that's enough." The dog's ears lifted at the sound of the Duchess's voice. He looked confused, his attention vacillating from Cinderella to Genevieve, as if he were trying to decide who he was supposed to obey. "It's all right, Bruno," whispered Cinderella. "Go on now." Hesitantly, her dog shuffled back towards the Duchess. Cinderella had had plenty of experience facing her stepmother when she was displeased. She'd gotten used to being punished for no good reason and to having Lady Tremaine find fault with her work even when there was none to be had. But she had no idea what to expect from the Duchess. The older woman gestured at the empty chair opposite her. "Sit." It was a command, not a request. Swallowing the lump that had formed in her throat, Cinderella obeyed. Genevieve reached for the teacup on her writing desk, indulging in a long, slow sip before speaking. "So," she returned the cup to its saucer, set it down, and dabbed the corners of her lips with a napkin. "You are the mystery girl he's been looking for all this time." The swan mask Cinderella had worn rested on the table beside the Duchess. Genevieve picked it up, tapping it against her shoulder as she pretended to wonder. "This was found in the gardens, and the guard said it belonged to the woman with Charles at the ball. I wonder who could have given it to her." Cinderella's shoulders tensed. "I was just about to tell you." Genevieve raised a hand. "I trusted you. I treated you like one of my own, and you kept this from me?" Cinderella hung her head. "I know." Genevieve's hand fell to her side. "And yet I couldn't be more relieved." Cinderella looked up, surprised to find the Duchess smiling. "The two sudden disappearances from the balls certainly gave me reason for concern. I was worried that my nephew had fallen in love with some frivolous girl with an expensive dress and overdone hair, or worse, a pretty face skilled at manipulating young princes into lovelorn states." She tapped her cheek with her fingers. "But you'll do nicely. Or so my gut tells me." "Oh, I'm so glad you think so," Cinderella said in surprise. "I was worried that you might not approve." "Well, I do. And if my brother doesn't, then I'll make sure he knows what a fool he is." Something screeched outside, and Genevieve winced, gesturing at the windows. "Close them for me, will you? I have important things to tell you, but who can concentrate with all that racket?" That racket turned out to be because of flowers, hundreds of them arriving by the cartful. Roses, orchids, lilies, daffodils, irises, and a dozen other varieties that she could not name. Heavy porcelain vases were mounted all around the grand ballroom and the royal gardens, displaying the arrangements in all their grandeur, but one arrangement stood out from the rest. From the Duchess's window, Cinderella watched the gardeners erect a trellis studded with roses. When the palace staff wheeled out a barrel of flowers, white pearlescent roses, intertwined with pink ones, as flushed as the height of the sunrise, she nearly gasped. Her parents' favorite flowers, white and pink roses with a touch of myrtle. Charles had been listening. "Are you paying attention to a word I'm saying?" Genevieve rapped Cinderella's shoulder with her fan. "A princess must be engaged and focused, not prone to daydreaming." Cinderella jerked her head away from the window. "I'm sorry. I was looking at the flowers." "Charles is doing, isn't it?" Genevieve clucked her tongue at the sight. "He's a romantic, like his father. Not all kings see the value of marrying for love, as my brother and nephew do. But sometimes love isn't enough. It'll take more, much more, for the court to accept you." Now Genevieve had Cinderella's full attention. "Arules has never had a commoner for a princess. I know. That will not be your only challenge." The heaviness in Genevieve's tone made Cinderella frown. "What do you mean?" The Duchess put on her tiara, and her voice turned grave. "This is between you and me, Cinderella, but the king is unwell. No one knows how ill. The blasted physicians here won't answer any of my questions directly. All they'll say is that he's taken a turn for the worse." Cinderella's hand jumped to her mouth. She couldn't believe it. "But he seemed fine at the masquerade and at breakfast." "Yes, I wasn't even aware myself that anything was wrong with him. But I suppose now it makes sense, his wanting to abdicate and everything." "Does it?" Cinderella couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right, but maybe it was simply her surprise. "Will he recover?" "I hope so, my dear. But Dr. Coast wants him to rest and to steer clear of affairs that will strain him." Genevieve placed a gentle hand on Cinderella's arm. "You do realize what this means, don't you?" she said quietly. "My brother may step down sooner than anyone anticipated, meaning Charles will become king. That meant if Cinderella married him, she would become—" she swallowed hard— "queen." "I'm not even ready to become a princess," she said. "I can't even imagine. I believe that's part of the reason my nephew chose you. Why he loves you." The Duchess's voice remained gentle. "Few would even have second thoughts about becoming a princess, and that you do is a great sign of wisdom. The crown can be a heavy responsibility, but most girls won't understand that. They only see marrying the prince as an opportunity to wear pretty gowns, live in a palace, and become a member of the royal family." Cinderella reflected on the Duchess's words. She remembered how eager her stepsisters had been to go to the ball, how conniving her stepmother had been for them to get the prince's attention. She'd never stopped to consider why Lady Tremaine had been so ruthless. "You've never known hardship, Cinderella," her stepmother had told her once, years ago. "You had a roof over your head, food to eat at every meal. Your father spoiled you from the day you were born." A ragged breath caught in Cinderella's throat. "I do not wish to marry the prince as a way to better my status." "I know, my dear, but others will not understand that. In fact, if you accept my nephew's proposal, you will face great opposition, particularly from the Grand Duke." Genevieve grimaced. "The question is, do you love Charles?" "Yes," Cinderella said without hesitation. "Of course I do." "And he loves you. I have no doubt that you are a right companion for him and the right princess for Arules." The Duchess bestowed Cinderella with a rare smile. "Ruling Arules will not be easy for Charles. At times it may even feel like a terrible burden, one that he should not have to bear alone. Now that he has you, I pray the two of you will help each other, and I will do what I can to help you feel at home with the role." Genevieve continued, "You have only hours until you go from palace servant to the future queen of Arules. Many will not take the news well, particularly not the blue-blooded young ladies who will resent the prince for rebuffing them for you." Cinderella thought of her stepsisters, who reveled in years in tormenting her. "I can handle it." When she did not elaborate, Genevieve appraised her. "When Charles declares that you're to be the princess of Arules, all attention will be on you. This is the first impression everyone will have of you. You have natural grace, which most princesses take decades to learn, but it won't be enough. Nothing would ever be enough, even if you had been royal." The Duchess lifted Cinderella's chin so their eyes were level. "In my time, we stood by the 3 Ps. I thought it was a bunch of hogwash, but I'll impart it to you anyway. It was essential that a princess be poised, pleasant, and—" "Pretty?" Cinderella guessed. "Presentable," corrected the Duchess. "That's what all the wigs and powder and rouge were for. Nowadays, women are more after the natural look, which I suppose isn't a problem for you." She hummed approvingly. "Now what color gown should you like to wear tonight?" "Something blue," replied Cinderella thoughtfully. "It was my mother's favorite color, and I wish with all my heart she could have met Charles and seen us together." "That's a beautiful thought, Cinder girl." She patted Cinderella's shoulders. "Let it be one of several happy thoughts that hold you strong tonight." "What do you mean?" Charles and I may not care that you're a servant in the palace, but the rest of the court will. We must give everyone as little opportunity as possible to find fault with you, the Grand Duke especially." It was the second time Genevieve had mentioned the Duke. Cinderella decided it couldn't hurt to voice a question that had been nagging at her. It was the second time Genevieve. When I went to the library last week, I came across an old book and a page. Sorry, guys. When I went to the library last week, I came across an old page in a book. It was torn off from an adventure novel. I think it might have been one of yours, from your husband. There was a message. We must bring magic back. A note of surprise touched the Duchess's features. You found that? I was curious about magic, Cinderella confessed at last. You see, I have a fairy godmother, and I'm afraid she's got into some trouble for helping me go to the ball. Charles has promised to take me to the council to speak in her defense, but I worry that they won't listen to me. They won't, confirmed Genevieve. Not with Ferdinand there. She pressed her lips tightly. Arthur used to leave me notes among the library's art books so Ferdinand wouldn't catch us trying to save as much magic as we could. The art and the books and the gifts from the fairies. Alas, in the end, we couldn't save the fairies themselves. A cloud passed outside, darkening the Duchess's expression. In spite of the risks, my husband dedicated himself to reinstating magic into the kingdom. He actually had a bit of fairy blood in him. Nothing that would amount to anything per se, but it was something he was proud of. I believe Ferdinand saw him as a threat, as someone who might have influence on my brother more than he would like. It was looking more and more like George would turn to Arthur as his advisor instead of Ferdinand when the former Grand Duke passed. So, Ferdinand accused my husband of treason for helping fairies hide in a rouleaus and for being magical and therefore dangerous himself. Arthur used the passageways in this very castle to get as many fairies out of a rouleaus as he could. When he wouldn't give up their locations, Ferdinand further smeared his reputation. My brother listened, desperate to find some way to channel his grief, I suspect. And lo, we were banished. A hard lump formed in Cinderella's throat, but she wasn't surprised. That's terrible. Ferdinand is terrible, Genevieve replied in a steely tone, but a rouleaus is the one that suffered most without magic. Then again, I suppose you youngsters don't remember what it was like to have magic in the kingdom. It was like seeing sunshine on the other side of the storm or having a little extra wind beneath your feet as you ran home. I can imagine, Cinderella said softly. When I had no hope left at all that things would get better, my fairy godmother came. I wonder now if hope is the most powerful magic of all. Hope, and I'll add a thick skin, said Genevieve sensibly. She touched Cinderella's shoulder. I should have guessed that you have a fairy godmother. The fairies come to those with the heart to change the world around them. You are certainly no exception, Cindergirl. The Duchess inhaled deeply. I'll do what I can to help her, but try not to worry about it tonight. Tonight marks a new beginning for you, and I have some words of advice. What friends you have now, you should treasure. Once you become royalty, people will only see what you can do for them. There's an unofficial last P my mother used to tell me. What is that? A princess must know how to pretend. Pretend the jeers don't bother you, or that the whispers aren't about you. A sad smile touched the Duchess's lips. Now I'm not so sure it was the best advice. Cinderella thought of how she'd sing to herself through the chores for her stepmother, wearing a smile even when she was so exhausted and so frustrated with her life that all she wanted to do was sink into her bed and dream away her troubles. I used to pretend quite a bit during the years with my stepmother. Her voice trailed off. I pretended I was happy, but I wasn't. I was miserable. She swallowed. I don't want to pretend anymore. Then don't, said Genevieve. If it were up to me, the last P should have been for punch. The Duchess chuckled. Heaven knows I have a number of people I'd love to get a nice rap on the head, the Duke being on the top of that list. I have faith you will make a fine princess. Charles does too. And so will the rest of her rouleaus once they get to know you. Cinderella drew a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. I hope so. You will. It begins tonight. Tonight. Arules will finally meet its runaway princess, the mysterious young lady who has captured Prince Charles's heart and the curiosity of the entire nation. Tonight you'll show them you're as lovely as your name. You're as lovely as your name, Cinderella echoed in her thoughts. It was almost like something her father had said once, when Drusilla and Anastasia first made fun of her name. Your name is lovely, he chided her, just like you. Do you want me to call you Ella? No, Papa, I like Cinderella. Then ignore them. You're stronger than that, my darling. Thank you, she told the Duchess, truly. Feel better? Much. The Duchess clapped her hands. Now let me show you the dress I've picked out for tonight. Oh, it'll go beautifully with those blue eyes of yours, Cinder Girl. The court will titter-tatter what it wants to about your background, but I'm not going to give them anything to carp about when it comes to your wardrobe. Chapter 28. A princess must be poised, pleasant, and presentable, Cinderella repeated to herself. When all else fails, pretending helps. Goodness, I hope I won't have to pretend tonight or punch anyone. Trying to calm the butterflies fluttering in her stomach, she smoothed her skirts with her hands. Her gown was azure blue, its ruffles accented with strands of pearls and delicate lace that gently tickled her ankles as she glided out of the Duchess' apartments towards the Amber Room, the hall adjacent to the ballroom. Trying to calm the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. I saw the flowers, she said softly, when Charles greeted her with his arm extended for her to take. They're beautiful. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss on her fingertips. Now there's a piece of your home here, one of your happier memories, to make this your home too. Cinderella placed her hand on the prince's outstretched arm, and he guided her into an anteroom that overlooked the gardens. Outside, the arched trellis she had seen the gardeners begin to construct had been finished. Now it was exquisitely braided with pink and white roses. As Cinderella gasped with delight, Charles reached for her fingers, gently pressing something into her hand. On her palm was a ring, and a simple band of gold, slightly burnished with age, and a pale blue sapphire in the center that glittered like a star-filled midnight sky. This was my mother's, said Charles. Nothing would have made her happier than for me to give it to you. Cinderella was at a loss for words. I've never seen anything so, do you like it? I do, she blushed. I mean, it's lovely. Chuckling, Charles slipped it under her finger. A bit more comfortable than glass slippers, I hope? Yes. It was her turn to laugh. Don't worry, I don't plan on running away. Charles gazed at her tenderly, but he never got a chance to reply. Pierre found them. They're waiting for you both to make the announcement. Together, Cinderella and the prince stepped into the ballroom hand in hand. No trumpets or royal heralds announced their entrance, and yet everyone in attendance turned to view them, their hushed anticipation almost palpable. It wasn't the first time 1,000 eyes had scrutinized Cinderella, but it was the first time she wasn't so wrapped up in the moment of being with Charles that she actually noticed it. As if he could read her mind, Charles gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, and she smiled at him. Then slowly, one step at a time, he escorted her down the staircase to the ballroom floor. Immediately, moving like a flock of birds, the guests gathered for a closer view of them. Who is she? Their voices could be heard whispering. Could it be she, the girl with the glass slipper? Opera glasses and monocles flew up as the guests tried to catch a glimpse of her face, doing their best to identify her. At first, their attention unnerved Cinderella, but as she drew closer and closer to the king, it became easier to ignore the whispers and the gossip. What made her more nervous was her imminent introduction to King George. As the music behind her swelled and ebbed, Cinderella's heart hammered. Seeing King George grimace at her made her anxiety multiply. Wait, she realized. He's not grimacing because he doesn't want to see me. He's in pain. How different he looked from the buoyant ruler at the masquerade, peering at the guests with his binoculars from his private balcony. Now he was shrunken and pale. His figure slouched against the throne. The king coughed, then straightened as best as he could. At his side, the Grand Duke tried his hardest not to smirk. Cinderella knew the smirk was meant for her, and yet something about the Duke looking so smug beside the ailing king struck a wary chord in her. Something wasn't right. She was barely listening to Charles's speech until she heard the words, "This is the woman I have chosen to marry, father." At that, she perked up. A merry smile replaced the king's grim expression, and the prince held up the glass slipper she had left behind for all to see. It sparkled, catching the lights of the chandeliers, and Pierre brought a cushioned stool for Cinderella to sit on so that she could try on the glass slipper before all the guests. But before she could sit, a woman's voice, low and malicious, rang out from the assembly. "The prince cannot marry her!" The music stopped abruptly, punctuated by the screech of a violin bow careening off the strings. Cinderella felt her back go rigid. Even without turning to look over her shoulder, she knew who had spoken. A hush came over the crowd, whispers buzzing. "Guards, restrain her," ordered one of the king's ministers. At her side, Charles tensed, but the prince prodded Cinderella forward, urging her not to glance behind them and to continue walking toward his father. But she couldn't. Her legs were wooden, her blood in her veins ice. Besides, she didn't need to turn. She knew exactly who had spoken, and it was time she faced her. Turning on her heel, Cinderella rushed back into the ballroom to confront her stepmother. "The prince cannot marry her," Lady Tremaine repeated vehemently. She bowed low before the king. "Please, your majesty, listen to what I have to say." "This is an outrage," exclaimed the king. "My lady, you do us all a disservice with this spectacle. I will not hear any more. Guards, take this woman away." "Sire," the Grand Duke spoke, "perhaps we should give the lady a chance to explain herself." "Thank you, your grace," said Lady Tremaine. "Cinderella was under my care for many years." Ferdinand frowned. "So she is your daughter?" "No, she's a servant, a nobody." "I'm not a nobody," Cinderella said firmly. If her stepmother thought she would remain meek and silent as she had while under her care, she was wrong. Cinderella had changed, and she refused to let this woman ruin her dreams once again. A sneer touched Lady Tremaine's mouth. "That is true. You're not a nobody. You're a thief." Without warning, she snatched Cinderella's necklace. "Ask her where she got these beads. They're my daughter's." "No, they're—" "And the glass slipper and the dress. They were stolen. A girl like her could never have afforded such fine clothes. Why else did I dismiss her from my home? She's a thief and a liar." "No," Cinderella exclaimed, "that isn't true." "Then how did you get this?" Lady Tremaine held up the green beads and the glass slippers and the gown you wore. "You have no friends, no family, and no money." "Yes, child," repeated the Duke. "How did you get them?" Cinderella was at a loss for words. Fearing for Lenore's safety, she couldn't very well reveal that it had been her enchantments that had given her the dress and the glass slippers. Not when magic was forbidden in Arules. "It doesn't matter." The prince's tone was cool. His dark brown eyes focused coldly on Cinderella's stepmother. "Lady Tremaine, you disrupt the happy occasion of my father meeting my future wife. Where Cinderella procured her garments is of no concern to you. As of tonight, she is no longer under your guardianship, and I would ask that you apologize to her for your accusations." "Apologize?" Lady Tremaine spluttered. "Yes, then kindly leave. My guards will escort you and your daughters out." Anastasia and Drusilla tugged on their mother's sleeves. "Mother, do something, Mother!" Lady Tremaine gawked at the prince. "Your Highness," she began, "I'm merely trying to save you from making a terrible mistake. I've known Cinderella ever since she was a child. She is a manipulative, horrible little—" "That is not true," Cinderella cried again. Taking a breath to calm herself, she explained. "For 9 years after my father died, I did all that my stepmother asked. I would never steal from her or lie to her. She was the only family I had left, and I treated her and her daughters with respect. Even when Lady Tremaine made her a servant in her own father's home," added Charles, loud enough for all to hear. A gasp came over the assembly, and Lady Tremaine whirled to deny the prince's accusation. Her father placed her under my care. My lady, interrupted the Grand Duke, his tone suddenly harsher than had been earlier. I distinctly recall that when I visited your manor with the glass slipper, you said you only had 2 daughters. Where was Cinderella? Cinderella glanced at the Duke, surprised he was taking her side. Before them, Lady Tremaine pursed her lips into a thin line. Come now, your grace. There must be a mistake. You cannot truly believe this. There are records, Ferdinand interjected. Your Highness, if you like to see, I have proof that Lady Tremaine has flagrantly disobeyed the king's proclamation to bring forth every eligible maiden in her household. I've heard enough, said the prince, raising a hand. Guards, escort Lady Tremaine and her daughters from the palace. Come tomorrow morning. They are to leave Arules and never return. Anastasia and Drasilla's faces were ashen, and they glanced nervously at the disapproving crowd around them. Their looks were met with narrowed eyes and lips curled in contempt. A chord of pity struck Cinderella as she remembered how Lenora and her kind had been similarly exiled from Arules. She placed a hand on the prince's arm. Don't banish them. They've been humiliated enough as it is. For me, please. At her touch, Charles's expression softened, and he turned to her stepmother and sister sternly. By the grace of our future princess, you and your daughters may remain in Arules, but you are never to set foot in this court ever again. Guards, called Ferdinand, motioning for them to resume escorting Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters away. But Lady Tremaine raised her chin. My girls and I will see ourselves out, she declared to the guards, motioning for them to step aside. She lifted her skirts, and her daughters mimicked her, all 3 gathering their pride. Wait. Cinderella barely recognized her own voice. She sounded strong, firm, nothing like the girl she'd once been. Stepmother, Anastasia, Drusilla. They halted in their step, turning slowly to face her. Cinderella caught her breath, not at all surprised by Lady Tremaine's upturned nose and lifted chin. She used to fear that expression, used to fear displeasing her stepmother. She no longer had that fear. The crowd had gone silent, but even if they hadn't, Cinderella wouldn't have noticed the dozens of onlookers in the chamber. A strange sense of calm had flooded her. The words she was about to say were ones she'd never dared before, but she dreamed of them for years. No longer would they be fantasy. I wish we could have been a family, she said, her voice strong yet quiet. Ever since my father married you, it's what I wished for most. Instead, you neglected me. You made me serve you, and then you tried to sell me. She paused. But I'm not angry with you. Now she had Lady Tremaine's attention. I thought I would be, Cinderella admitted. I was. But then I realized that it would only make me unhappy. And after being unhappy in your house for so long, I would never choose to feel that way again. I've accepted we aren't a family, and that we never will be. I've also accepted that I cannot forget those years that you were cruel to me. The height of Lady Tremaine's chin wilted ever so slightly. She wouldn't look at Cinderella, but her stepsisters lowered their eyes, shame tinging their cheeks. I forgive you, stepmother, Anastasia, Drusilla. I am not angry with you. If anything, I pity you. You can't know happiness in your life if your life is built around resentment. For your sakes, I hope your hearts change. There. That was all she wished to say, and a soft murmur swelled across the room. Their heads bowed. Her stepmother and stepsisters hurried out of the palace, and Charles returned to her side. As conversation resumed among the court, the Grand Duke slithered towards Cinderella and the prince. Come now, your Highness. You ought to take a moment for the unrest from this unfortunate debacle to settle down before you introduce your bride to His Majesty. Cinderella barely paid attention as the Duke led the couple away from the ballroom and toward an anteroom blocked off by velvet curtains. All her years with Lady Tremaine had come to an end, and she was free, for good. She'd never have to see the woman ever again if she didn't wish to. Cinderella sank onto one of the cushioned chairs, glad she had a moment to collect herself before going back out to meet the king. "Are you all right?" said the prince, sitting beside her. A mess of emotions tugged at Cinderella's thoughts: sadness, relief, pity. She wasn't sure how to sort them out yet, but one thing she was sure of was her love for Charles, and she managed to smile for him. "Thank you for letting her stay." "Anything for you," said Charles, "though I have to say she's terrible, even more than you let on." "Indeed," cut in the Grand Duke, reminding them both that he was there. Cinderella jumped in her chair. "That was very elegantly done, your highness," Ferdinand said. "Imagine the nerve of making a maid out of her own stepdaughter. Best to expel such ruffians from the future princess." "Yes," replied the prince stiffly, "and thank you for your help, Ferdinand." "It is my pleasure. I vividly recall visiting the Tremaine household." He shuddered. "Who would have thought there was such a lovely maiden there?" He smiled widely at Cinderella. "Rest here now, and I will ensure that Pierre has retrieved the glass slipper for safekeeping. Allow me also to see it to the order in the ballroom has been restored, and that I will escort you both to his majesty." "It's unlike Ferdinand to be so helpful," murmured the prince when the duke had left. Charles stroked his chin. The Tremaine household was on his list of homes to visit. "I wonder why he couldn't find you." "He couldn't find me because I was hidden away," said Cinderella softly. "My stepmother locked me in my room when he came to our estate with the glass slipper. I shattered the one I kept so my stepsisters couldn't use it to get you to marry one of them." She swallowed. Her mouth was dry, her chest still tight from the encounter with Lady Tremaine and her stepsisters. "Your father doesn't think I'm a thief, does he? I didn't steal the glass slippers." "I know that," replied Charles. "My father will understand once I explain it to him." "But will you ask him about my fairy god?" interrupted the Grand Duke from the doorway. He really had a knack for catching people unaware, and Cinderella wondered how much of their conversation he had heard. "Your father wishes to see you." Charles sent her an apologetic look. "I'll tell father everything, then send for you." "Go," said Cinderella to the prince. "I'll wait here for you." But as soon as the prince left with the Grand Duke, royal guards appeared out of nowhere, wearing dark and menacing glares. Cinderella tensed, her thoughts sharpening with fear. They weren't the same men who often accompanied Prince Charles. Pierre wasn't among them. Cinderella was about to remark on it when one of the guards addressed her with a bow. "For your safety, my lady, we've come to escort you from the ball." "From the ball?" Cinderella repeated. "I'm waiting for the prince. He's gone to see his father." "Orders." The guard pushed her toward a side door that she'd never taken before. "This way," he said gruffly, leading her into a dim, narrow hallway. "They're walking too fast," she thought, panicking. "I think I should wait for Charles." When she tried to turn back, the guards grabbed her shoulders. "Well, where are we going?" she asked, her voice thick with apprehension. "The Grand Duke will explain. He wishes to have a private word with you." Cinderella frowned. "I thought he was with the prince." The guard eyed her, but instead of responding, he tightened his grip on her shoulders and nudged her to walk faster. The music from the ballroom had grown so faint she couldn't even hear it anymore. She bit her lip, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The windows seemed to be getting smaller and the hall shorter. They made so many turns that she lost track of where they were in the palace. She held her chin high. Whatever the Grand Duke meant to tell her, however he meant to humiliate her and taunt her that she wasn't good enough to become a princess, he wouldn't be able to change her mind about marrying Charles. "The Grand Duke will see you here," said the guard, gesturing inside the room. Someone closed the door behind her with a thud. Cinderella glanced back, but none of the guards had accompanied her inside, leaving her alone with the Grand Duke. A chill settled over her. The room she'd entered was sparsely furnished with a square wooden table and two velvet upholstered chairs that seemed out of place amidst the starkness of their surroundings. In the center of it all, framed by two tall candles and comfortably wreathed in In the center of it all, framed by two tall candles and comfortably wreathed in a shadow, sat the Duke. "My child," he said in greeting. Ferdinand set down his pen and folded in half the paper on which he had been writing. "Have a seat. I must apologize for taking you away from the ball tonight, but I have an urgent matter to discuss with you." Cinderella glanced at the offered seat. "I prefer to remain standing, thank you." "Very well, very well." "You didn't take Charles to see the king," she said flatly. "You lied, didn't you?" The Duke took out his monocle and twirled the chain around his finger. Then he clasped it and curled his fist tight. "My child," he repeated, "it is my misfortune to be the conveyor of bad news, but it is my duty to see the future of this kingdom. You see, a nation is a fragile thing, and in these times—" He let his voice drift. "What are you trying to say?" "I am afraid there is no delicate way of putting this, but it has come to my attention that you have cast some dark and ancient enchantment upon His Royal Highness, our noble and beloved Prince Charles Maximilian Alexander, to make him fall in love with you." Cinderella's hand shot to her mouth. "That's a lie. Young lady, you may not have been aware of this, but magic is prohibited in Arules, and all magic persons are banished and expressly forbidden from practicing their craft. As such, your use of enchantment, and particularly upon a member of the royal family, is an act of high treason. Without further ado, you are under arrest." The 3 guards that had brought her to meet the Grand Duke returned, this time with thick ropes slung over their shoulders. Cinderella's eyes widened with alarm. She started for the door, but it was futile. The guards surrounded her. One muffled her mouth with a cloth, and the other 2 tied her wrists behind her back. "A moment," said the Duke, his voice cutting through her muffled cries. Cinderella caught her breath. Maybe this was all a mistake. But as the Grand Duke turned to address her, her heart sank. There was a gleam in his eye that suggested otherwise. "Don't look at me like that, my dear," he said. "I wish it didn't have to be so. But the Crown Prince of Arules cannot marry a servant. Order would be disrupted, and centuries of tradition and propriety would be upended. It simply wouldn't do. You will come to understand in time." It sounded like he was speaking more to himself and to her. "I gather from your encounter with Lady Tremaine that you have not had an easy life," the Duke went on, schooling his features into an expression that resembled sympathy. "I am not without pity, my child, and I certainly am not without reason. I am prepared to offer you a generous deal." At the flick of his wrist, the guard closest to her pulled her toward the table and yanked off her gag and bindings. Ferdinand touched his finger to his lips, warning her not to scream. "Listen to what I have to say first. I'd like you to pen a note to Prince Charles, informing him that you have had second thoughts about marrying him and that you never loved him." "Never," Cinderella squirmed, trying to escape the guard's hold, but he was too strong. "He wouldn't believe it even if I did." "Young lady, you have known the prince but for a few days. I have known him all my life." The Duke pushed a pen into her hands, but she flung it away. The guard tightened his hold on her shoulders. "In exchange," he continued, ignoring her, "I will see to it that you're provided for. I will arrange for a generous estate in the southern region of Arules to be gifted to you, with a healthy annual reparation of 10,000 arules. Surely that would be more than enough to appease a young lady of your upbringing. No amount of money or jewels or land will make me change my mind." "I don't care about any of that." Cinderella shook her head. "Go ahead and send me away. Charles will never stop looking for me." "Oh, young love," said Ferdinand, shaking his head with a chuckle. "I take it you refuse my generous proposal?" He sighed. "Then we must move on to my alternative plan." Ferdinand seized Cinderella's hand, and the guards held her so firm so he could remove the ring that Charles had given her. "A pretty bauble. Our beloved queen's, I presume." "Bless her soul." "Give that back," cried Cinderella. "Not another word," Ferdinand warned, and one of the guards immediately clamped a hand over her mouth, stifling her shouts. The Duke twirled the ring around his finger, watching the sapphire sparkle and catch the candlelight. "I think I shall include this with the message I have prepared for young Charles. He reached into his jacket pocket, fishing out a neatly folded note. I had a feeling you'd decline my offer, so I went through the trouble of already preparing one. Alarm surged through Cinderella. No, she cried, but the sound was muffled. Desperately, she twisted and squirmed, trying to claw the guard's hands away from her mouth, but he only tightened his grip. The Duke waved the note before her. Let's have this delivered to Prince Charles straight away, shall we? Now I must hurry back to the ball before I am missed. Worry not, Cinderella. The prince will think of you fondly, though I regret that even he will forget you in time. Without missing a beat, Ferdinand deliberately dropped the ring into the envelope, then somehow threw a sack over Cinderella's head, and her world spiraled into darkness. Chapter 29. My dearest Charles, I have had second thoughts about marrying you and becoming the Princess of Arules. I must confess I only pretended to be in love with you to escape the dreary confines of my life with Lady Tremaine. Alas, I am overcome with guilt and cannot go on with the wedding. My mind will not be changed. Please don't look for me. Your most humble servant, Cinderella. Charles read the letter again and again, trying to make sense of the puzzle it presented. There was no puzzle, really. The message was quite clear. She didn't love him, and she didn't want to marry him. He was a mess of emotions. Every other time he reread the letter, he believed it. I have no one to blame but myself, he murmured. He had told her, as honestly as he could, that life as a prince of Arules would not be easy, that if she changed her mind, he would respect it. And yet, deep down, he couldn't believe she left him. Couldn't believe that this letter was from her. The words were formal and stilted, not at all like his beloved Cinderella. But the greatest part of the puzzle was the ring. Tucked between the folds of the letter, it was the same ring he had given her the previous night. He rubbed the engraving inside the band, the one that proclaimed the love his father had for his mother, equal in one step, equal in hearts for always. So why did he refuse to believe it was from her? Because if she truly left, then she isn't at all the girl I thought she was. Clutching the letter tight, Charles rang for Pierre. There's still no word for her, Your Highness, said his attendant, responding before Charles even asked. It was the 6th time in a half hour that he'd rung for the man, probably the 100th time since the ball had abruptly ended the night before. Check everywhere. The servants' quarters, the stables, the coach house. We are looking, Your Highness. Pierre bowed his head. The Grand Duke has sent his entire staff in search of her. Unfortunately, so far, it appears she has vanished. Vanished for the 3rd time. Trying to sort out his thoughts, Charles clung to reason. The first time, she had fled at the stroke of midnight, fearing the enchantment her fairy godmother had cast over her would expire. The second time, she had left the ball because she had feared an encounter with her stepmother and stepsisters. This time, I must confess, I only pretended to be in love with you to escape the dreary confines of my life with Lady Tremaine. Charles balled his fist at his sides. He still refused to believe it. I should have gone after her last night, he mumbled to himself. It would not do for you to chase after her, Ferdinand had said. Especially with all the guests here, Your Highness. You must not appear distressed. It would only encourage rumors to spread, and given the uproar caused by Lady Tremaine's outcry, we must contain any possibility of a scandal. Stay with your father. The strain of tonight's events is not sitting well with him. He has retired to his chambers to rest. Go to him and allow me to search for the maiden. He'd been so stunned by Cinderella's disappearance and worried about his father that he actually trusted Ferdinand. This time, he wouldn't sit idly by. He grabbed his cloak. Tell my father I won't be coming to breakfast, and please extend my apologies to my aunt. Well, where are you going? Pierre blustered. To find her, replied Charles without stopping. It's what I should have done the first time. The prince cut through the gardens, headed for the hall where the seamstresses worked. Before he had left the palace, there was one person he needed to see. Have you seen her? He asked Louisa in lieu of a greeting. Cinderella? The seamstress's brows leapt with shock, and she bent into a hasty curtsy. No, Your Highness, not since yesterday at the ball. It's not like her. She's usually so reliable. Charles's shoulders slumped. He'd hoped that she would have given her friend a clue where she'd gone. Cinderella had spoken so glowingly of Louisa. She's the first friend I've had in years, aside from my dog Bruno and the mice in my stepmother's house. Louisa, isn't it? He said quietly, only now becoming aware that there were dozens of seamstresses trying their hardest to pretend they weren't listening. Would you please let my attendant Pierre know immediately if you see her? Yes, Your Highness, I will. Worry etched itself on Louisa's brow. I didn't realize she was missing. You should look for her dog, Bruno. Your aunt adopted him, and Cinderella wouldn't leave without him. If he's still there, he might be able to find her. Bruno, Charles started. Why hadn't he thought of that? He touched Louisa's shoulder, thanking her before he hastily left. That's a brilliant idea. Thank you. Thank you truly. But when he reached the Duchess's chamber, there was no sign of Bruno. Charles, Aunt Genevieve greeted him, looking grave. I was about to send Pierre to look for you. Your father wishes to see you. She paused. It's urgent. It appears Charles wasn't the only one who had received the king's summons. Armed with a fountain pen and a scroll, the Grand Duke was already present in King George's bedchamber. As usual, he looked like he was up to no good. In the event that the prince does not make a suitable match, said Ferdinand, then I, Grand Duke Ferdinand de Molloy, esteemed protector of Arulies and trusted advisor to King George, will assume the duties of safeguarding the kingdom by whatever means necessary. By whatever means necessary, echoed the king weakly. Thank you, sire, said the duke, taking a pen from the king's hand. An expression of smug glee grew on Ferdinand's face, one that Charles did not like at all. Stop! Cried Prince Charles. Father, what are you doing? At the sound of his voice, the king's mouth bent into a feeble smile. Charles, my boy, is that you? The prince rushed to his father's bedside and tried to seize the scroll from the Grand Duke. Father, did you sign? Best not to upset your father, interrupted Ferdinand. Charles glared at the Grand Duke. In his iciest tone, he said, Get out. Ferdinand blinked, pretending to look bewildered. Your Highness, your manner is most uncouth, and certainly not befitting of... Get out, repeated Charles. I will not say it again, and give me that scroll. The Duke's smirk returned. I'm afraid you do not have that privilege, Your Highness, he said calmly, tying the scroll with a green ribbon. As your father's advisor, it is my duty to bring the scroll to the council. Rest assured, I am merely trying to preserve the sanctity of the nation and protect. You are trying to protect your own interest. He is not, wheezed the king. Listen to what he has to say, Charles. Startled, the prince knelt beside his father. Aunt Genevieve said you called for me, that it was urgent. Your father is unwell, Ferdinand straightened his collar. He has appointed me to discuss with you the kingdom's future, your future. Charles struggled to remain calm. He did not like the sound of this. It appears that the young maiden named Cinderella was seen leaving the palace yesterday evening, renouncing your royal highness's admirable intention to marry her and publicly humiliating our noble prince before the entire court. I don't need you to recount last night's events, said Charles through his teeth. What is your point? The point is, the lack of bride also leaves in question Arula's line of succession, said Ferdinand. His Majesty and I both agree that as a matter of principle, your Highness must consider an alliance with a princess from a neighboring kingdom. I have already made my choice, and your choice has abandoned you, rejoined the Duke smoothly, for the third time. I have kept an open mind regarding your choice of bride, Charles, said the king, but the girl, Cinderella, is not suitable. Father, perhaps you should take your leave now, Ferdinand, said the king. I'll continue this discussion alone with my son. As you wish, your Majesty, said Ferdinand, hiding a smug smile. When the door closed, Charles sat at the king's bedside. He couldn't believe how weak his father looked. His skin was sallow and his eyes bloodshot and sunken. Just yesterday, the king had seemed fine. What had happened? My boy, I know your heart was set on Cinderella. I wanted her to be the one for you. I wanted to live to see you two married, to bounce your child on my knee. The king's voice trembled. He sank deeper into his blankets. the bed's massive headboard dwarfing his shrunken frame. Unfortunately, given last night's events, I do not think she is right for you. Father, I know it looks like she fled the ball, not just one time, but 3. The girl fled 3 times and vanished 3 times. The king shook his head. If she loved you, she wouldn't have left. The words thudded in Charles' ears, and he swallowed, not wanting to believe them. Please don't look for me, her note had ended. No goodbye, no apology, no hint at all of where she was going or why she had suddenly changed her mind. That stung. He'd seen how uncomfortable she looked being in the center of attention. His aunt had told him now, when she'd asked Cinderella what she wished to wear for the ball, she replied, something blue. It was my mother's favorite color, and I wish with all my heart she could have met Charles and seen us together. Other young women in the kingdom would have asked for a gown fit for a princess, for satin gloves rimmed with crystals, a tiara studded with rubies. Cinderella had asked for none of these things. That's why he loved her. That was why he loved her, for the earnest way she thought of her words before she spoke, or how her eyebrows danced when she smiled, or how her voice became sing-song when she teased him. That was why he missed her. His father reached for his hand. I am not well, my boy. The prince's attention snapped to his father. You will be. Dr. Coast will. Dr. Coast can't figure out what's wrong with me. I don't know how much time I have, and there's no point in beating around the bush. I need you to promise me something. The prince held his breath. He knew he wasn't going to like whatever his father was about to ask him, and yet he heard himself say, Yes, father, anything. You are the future of Arules, Charles. Consider the Duke's proposal and meet with the princesses. Secure peace for our country by choosing one to marry. Softly, Charles replied, What about love, father? Didn't you say it was your love for my mother that made you a better ruler? A shadow fell over the king's face, and he grimaced. Perhaps I was wrong, he said tightly. Perhaps times were simpler then. He inhaled. At least consider it, my son, for the good of the country. Charles warmed his father's hand with his own. A hard lump formed in his throat, and each word crawled out of his chest, hurting more than the last. Yes, father. Blinking away the moisture in his eyes, Charles slowly rose and kissed his father's forehead. Rest well, Papa. I will come see you again soon. George pulled on Charles's collar, drawing him close. He reached behind his pillow, pushing a scroll into Charles's arms. You are king now, he rasped. What? His father coughed, his hands trembling as he let go of Charles. I wanted to wait until you were married, but it was always the plan for you to take over. I'd only hoped I would live longer. Charles wouldn't hear it. You're not dying. His father leaned back. I certainly feel like it, his voice drifted. You're young, Charles, but not as young as I was when I assumed the throne. You will be a good king. Ferdinand will help you. Father. A soft wheeze escaped his father's lips, settling into a snore. After confirming that his father had fallen asleep, Charles sighed. He would try again later. Be well, father, he said softly before exiting the king's bedchamber. Your Highness, are you all right? Asked the royal chamberlain outside the door. The prince drew a deep breath. What could he say to that? His father's health was rapidly deteriorating, and the only person he wanted to talk to about it, the only person left in the world whom he loved and who could possibly have made him feel better, had vanished without so much a goodbye. How could he be all right? Yet he mustered the barest of nods. Yes, thank you for your concern, Sir Chamberlain. Please see to it that I am not disturbed for the rest of the day. Yes, your Highness. I mean, your Majesty. The word Your Majesty rang in Charles's ears. Without another word, he turned on his heel, feeling more lost and alone than he could ever remember feeling. Chapter 30. Heavy strokes of pink brushed the dawn, pink like the ballet slippers worn by the dancers Charles had taken her to see only 2 evenings ago, a lifetime ago. Chimes from the clock tower rattled Cinderella's nerves. 6 o'clock. Just yesterday she had been in the Duchess's chamber preparing for her first introduction to the king and his court. Funny how much could change in half a day. The clock tower went silent, and she wondered if that had been the last time she would ever hear its bells, whether it would be the last time she ever saw Rules again. She pressed her cheek against her cell's lone window, staring at the palace. How near it was, so near she could make out the colors of the curtains drawn against each window, but so far no one would hear her if she shouted for help. After I escaped Mr. Levere, I promised I'd never feel so helpless again. Her fists clenched. But what can I do? She tried everything, pleading with the guards outside, pulling at the bars on her window, kicking at the door, all to no avail. Her fairy godmother couldn't help her escape a locked cell, and calling for her would only incriminate Cinderella further. The only person who could do anything was Charles, but if he'd gotten the Duke's falsified letter from her and believed it, no, he wouldn't believe it. Cinderella clung to the hope that he was looking for her. He had to be. But would he find her before the Grand Duke sent her away? All night she dreaded the Duke's return, feared being sent so far from a Rules that Charles would never find her. Unable to sleep, she curled up against the wall, squeezing the bars of her window as she waited for the outside world to wake. It was an ordinary day to everyone else. Everyone but her. Finally, she released the bars, her fingers so stiff it hurt to remove them. 3 mice nipped at the frayed remains of a rope snaking across her cell. She knelt beside them, taking solace in their company. In the weeks since she'd fled her stepmother's house, Cinderella had tried to forget the past life, but she suddenly missed the little friend she'd left behind. A faint but familiar pang of loneliness touched her heart, and Cinderella pulled her legs to her chest, hugging herself close. It was cold in her cell, the gossamer sleeves of her gown clinging to the goosebumps that had risen on her arms. Just as her eyes closed, trying to summon a happy thought that might relieve the heaviness in her chest, the sound of a key turning in the prison door made her lurch. She shot to her feet. Dared she hope it was Charles, or the Duchess, perhaps? Alas, it was the Duke. His tall, wiry figure emerged from behind the prison door, a frigid breeze accompanying him and jostling the blue tassels hanging from his shoulders. Get! He stomped on the floor, trying to scare the mice away. When they disappeared into the holes of the wall, he exhaled with relief and finally greeted her. I thought you'd like to know that preparations are being made for your departure. I am not a sorceress, she said defiantly, and you know it. I'm quite aware of that. If you were, you would not still be in your prison cell. Obviously, and we would have taken no chances with your punishment, which we would have been far more severe. His response surprised her. Then why am I here? The Duke heaved a sigh, the corners of his mouth turning downward. If not for the gleam in his eye, he might have actually looked like he pitied her. My role as advisor to the king is not an easy one. I take no joy in uprooting your life and causing the prince distress. Then let me go, Cinderella said. There's still time for you to do the right thing. You don't seem to understand. Anyhow, things are more complicated now. The Duke paused deliberately, especially since the king is dying. Cinderella stilled. Duchess Genevieve had mentioned the king taking a turn for the worse, but hearing it from the Grand Duke's lips confirmed her fear. Dying? Yes, he collapsed last night, not long after the ball ended. The physicians blamed it on the stress caused by the scandal revolving around the true identity of a certain mystery princess. He collapsed? Cinderella staggered back, putting space between herself and the Duke. How is he now? How is Charles? Ferdinand ignored her questions. Imagine how aghast the king was when he learned that his son was planning to marry a maidservant. You, Cinderella, you are to blame for this. Me? More than ever. Cinderella was certain something wasn't right here. The Grand Duke didn't seem to be worried at all about the king, but too much was happening at once, and Cinderella couldn't make sense of it all as her head swam with the Duke's accusations and the news that the king was ill. In fact, he went on, Charles has already conceded to the king's demand that he marry a princess of our neighboring kingdom. No, she whispered. Yes, I'm afraid it is so. You see, he chose duty over love, just as I expected. How is Charles? She asked, her voice but a pale whisper. After 4 years he had only just returned home. She couldn't imagine how distraught he must be to find his father gravely ill. The prince will be fine. No need for tears, my dear. And the king? She whispered. The Duke leaned closer to her, and the smirk that had rested on his face in the ballroom returned. His Majesty's health is none of your concern. How can you be so? Her hands flew to her mouth as realization hit her. The vial she had found in the nobleman's pocket. The smirk the Duke had been wearing as the king coughed. The king's ill, isn't he? Wait, the king isn't ill, is he? Cinderella's distress over the king's health curdled into horror. You poisoned him. A smile spread across Ferdinand's face. Poison is such an unpleasant word. Indeed, I have been tipping the scales for months now, only a little at first, mostly as a precaution, but once I realized my influence on the crown was, well, waning, something had to be done. But worry not. I would administer the antidote once I am presented with my new title as Grand Overseer of the Kingdom. How could you? Ferdinand sniffed, twirling the chain of his monocle flippantly around his finger. He seemed to revel in justifying his wicked deed. His Majesty has become weak. 20 years ago, he would have never even thought about repealing the ban against magical beans. Yes, Cinderella, under King George's last decree, your precious fairy godmother would be allowed back into Irules. He sneered at her. Don't look so surprised. Yes, I know it was she who helped you seduce the prince. Imagine a doe-eyed young woman like you being a sorceress. He laughed. Your fairy godmother will never be safe in Irules as long as I'm in power. And as of noon today, I will be. Why, she seethed, I don't know how you live with yourself. Quite pleasantly, if you must know. Genevieve told you he means to pass on the throne to Charles, didn't she? At first, I was appalled by George's decision. Charles isn't ready to rule, and he knows it. Then I thought to myself, this is an opportunity to restructure the monarchy. Should Charles rise to the throne prematurely, he would naturally need someone by his side, guiding him. Ferdinand tugged on the ends of his mustache. Once the council meets today, it is I who will be safeguarding the kingdom, as Grand Overseer and Counselor Regent. That is, until Prince Charles is sufficiently prepared to be king, a determination that lies naturally with me. You lied to the king from the very beginning. I guided him, young lady, as is my job, my duty. So you see, Cinderella, I cannot have you staying in the palace and knowing all my secrets, especially not as the Princess of Irules. You will be brought to a proper dungeon, the location of which only I shall know, and there you shall end your days. How could you do this to your prince? Cinderella burst out, barely listening to the Duke. Your king. He trusted you. Ferdinand scoffed. I chose love for my country over love for my king. Why should they be different? You think me without a heart, my child, but in time you will see that all I have is done good for. You will see that all I have done is for the good of Irules. It sounds like all you have done is for the good of yourself, Cinderella. A reputation takes a lifetime to build. I won't have mine fall to ruins because Prince Charles chooses an unsuitable girl to take as a wife, and the whole country falls to chaos as a result. Irules needs a traditional queen, one whose presence will not undermine the rigors of the monarchy. The rigors of the monarchy. Maybe the people would welcome a queen like them, Cinderella countered. The people don't know what is best for them. The Duke donned his hat, pushing the feathers so it did not obscure his vision. They complain that we nobles have all the power and all the gold, but if we were to allow peasants to make laws, then imagine the chaos that would unfold. If you were to give every commoner 100 pieces of gold, then who would bother tilling the fields and working the land? Irules would fall into disarray. No, I shan't allow that to happen. Order must be upheld above all. You think you're protecting this country, she said quietly, but you're not. It's people like you who are hurting it. We shall see, Cinderella. We shall see. It is no longer your concern. Now I must go, for the council awaits my announcement of Charles's imminent marriage to the Princess of Lords. The guards will alert me when your fairy godmother arrives. He bent, whispering conspiratorially. You see, I'm quite confident she will come to your aid, and when she does, she'll regret she ever set foot in a roule's. He gave a dark chuckle, and Cinderella's insides clenched. No! But he rolled away, and the door closed behind him, his steps clicking against the cold, dank stone. A plea for him to come back nearly crawled out of Cinderella's throat, but she closed her mouth, refusing to beg. She would find a way out of this herself. Taking in her bleak surroundings, she swallowed. Somehow. Doubt pricked her insides. There was no Bruno to help her distract the guards, no Louisa to help her sneak out of the prison. And calling upon Lenore was out of the question. That was what the Grand Duke wanted. She'd have to do this alone, but how? Wringing her hands together, she leaned her head back against the wall, ignoring the mice skittering at her feet. Had it only been a few weeks ago that she'd been alone on the streets, promising herself she would never feel this helpless again? Think, Cinderella, she gritted her teeth. Think. She only had until noon, when the guards would arrive to take her away from the palace, when the Duke would meet with the council and become the grand overseer of the kingdom. She needed to beat Ferdinand to the council. Chapter 31. For the 100th time, Cinderella kicked at her skirt, searching its silken layers for something, anything that could help her get out of there. Odds were slim, and absent-minded seamstresses might have left some pins or a needle in such a fine garment, but Cinderella was desperate. She flipped the folds of her skirt back and forth, and did the same with her sleeves, unrolling them. Nothing. What she was hoping for, a needle, a button, none of it would be any good against the guards outside her cell. It'd be better than nothing, and I have nothing. Frustrated, she staggered back, resting her head against the brick wall. Her beads clattered against her neck, and Cinderella's hand went up to her mother's necklace. More than once, it had occurred to her that she could try to bribe the guards with it, but the beads were from her mother, and she would never give them away. An idea came to her. Her hands trembling, she reached for the loaf of bread a guard had tossed into her cell earlier. Breakfast, he'd barked at her. He shuddered at the sight of mice nibbling at her ropes. Better eat it before the rats get to it. She ignored him, feeding the mice half her loaf while she brainstormed ways to escape. Word must have spread among the mice that there was food to be had. Nearly a dozen were scurried about her cell, eagerly awaiting her meal. Cinderella sprinkled a few crumbs on the ground, a plan slowly forming in her mind. Outside her tiny window, the sun glimmered, nearly at the peak of its daily ascent. On the other side of the cell, the door, the guards started talking, and Cinderella stilled. Had the carriage arrived? His Grace wants to be sure no one notices the prisoner leaving. Go on ahead and fetch her. She was up all night scratching at the door, and I think she's at it again, the meek little mouse. I'll ready the carriage. Cinderella clenched her fist. She'd show them just how meek she was. I have to hurry, she thought. Carefully, she broke the remains of her loaf into the smallest chunks that she could and stuffed them into her pocket. Then she knelt, picking up 5 of the mice scurrying about her feet and tucking them into the folds of her skirt. It felt like forever before she finally heard footsteps. Good morning, little mouse, the guard jeered. You finished your breakfast? Open the door, Cinderella thought. Hurry and open the door. Is it time? She asked, clutching her dress tightly. The mice inside wriggled, and she worried they'd scamper out before she could go through with her plan. Have you come to take me away? With a laugh, the guard finally unlocked the door. He whipped out a long scarf, holding it toward her threateningly. First, I've got to make sure you don't make too much noise. Can't have you screaming the entire trip out of Valours. He tried to seize her by the arm, and Cinderella sidestepped. Working as fast as she could, she reached into her pocket and threw the breadcrumbs into the guard's hair. Then she unclinched the folds of her skirt and let the mice go free. They scurried after the guard, nibbling at his leather boots and climbing up his legs to his head. As he cried out in alarm, Cinderella stole out of the prison toward freedom. A daunting hill separated the prison from the palace, the hundreds of steps no doubt designed to exhaust any captives who dared escape the Grand Duke's clutches. Hungry and tired, Cinderella could feel her muscles stiffening from the endless climb, but she pressed on. Up and up the narrow steps she scrambled, keeping one hand against the hill's rough stone face to help her balance. There had to be a faster way to the palace. Behind her, the 2 guards were catching up. She couldn't rest now. Once she was halfway up the path, the stone behind her fingertips rumbled. A trap door behind the moss swung open, revealing quite possibly the last person expected to run into. The Duchess of Orleans yanked her through the hidden door, shutting it behind them, and covered Cinderella's mouth with her hand. Quiet, Cinder girl. Louisa, blow out the candle. A second surprise. Louisa standing beside the Duchess, her shaking hands clutching a candle that she immediately snuffed. And Bruno. Her bloodhound looked fiercely proud of himself, and Cinderella knelt to hug him. Were you the one who found me? She whispered. Dear brave Bruno, thank you. In the darkness, the 4 waited, Cinderella's heart hammering through the silence. Where did she go? The guards asked each other. I saw her disappear around here. Outside, leaves rustled. Nothing but moss and ivy. She couldn't have gone missing like that. Why not? The Grand Duke said she was a sorceress, didn't he? Maybe she evaporated into the air, or turned into one of these birds squawking everywhere. When the voices faded, Louisa relit the candle, and the Duchess ushered Cinderella into a dimly lit tunnel. What is this place? Cinderella asked. You didn't think the servants' tunnels were the only secret passages in the palace, did you? Genevieve harumphed. I know all the servant entrances and exits, most of them so well hidden you wouldn't think to notice them. These were built during darker times in case the royal family ever needed to escape. These are the ones Arthur used to help the fairies all those years ago. There are 2 paths, one back to the palace and one into Valours. Right as she said it, they approached the fork. The choice is yours, Cinder girl. You've seen what dangers come with being a princess, and this is only the beginning. Take the left and it will bring you to Valours, or the right. I'm going back to Charles, Cinderella said immediately. There was no hesitation in her tone. She knew her choice. The Duchess smiled, taking the candle to lead the way. Then right we go. Cinderella fell in step with Louisa. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't. I didn't know how. You don't need to apologize, Louisa said, threading her arm through Cinderella's. I understand. Friends? Always, replied Louisa. She winked. I got to meet the prince this morning, thanks to you. Cinderella's pulse quickened. He was looking for me? Yes, and I had no idea where you were. That didn't sit well with me, so I sent him to find Bruno. But he never got a chance to look for you, Genevieve interrupted. The king sent for him, and now he's stuck in a council meeting. Fortunately, Bruno here knew something was amiss. All day the mutt was whimpering, and when I took him on a walk, he raced out of the palace, nearly gave me a stroke, I tell you. But he kept running and barking, and I put 2 and 2 together and figured that it was because of you. Didn't take a genius to figure out that Ferdinand the snake had taken you away. Genevieve picked a piece of straw from Cinderella's hair, and I was entirely right. Louisa pushed open another trapdoor, this one leading into the palace. Once Cinderella was inside, Genevieve started leading them toward the royal audience chamber to find the prince and stop his betrothal ceremony to the Princess of Lords. But halfway down the hall, Cinderella stopped. There was something else she had to do. Your Highness, Louisa, she said, you must find Charles and hurry. Interrupt the ceremony if you have to. Where are you going? The Grand Duke. I have to stop him. He's been poisoning the king. What? And lying to him to engineer his own rise to power. I have to prove that he's a traitor to Arules. You can't go snooping around the Duke's office looking like that, Louisa said, eyeing her torn gown and bruised arms. Not when the guards are looking for you. Here, take this. The seamstress reached into her basket and passed Cinderella a pile of garments. These are yours. After we found out you were the runaway princess, Aunt Ermina asked me to take them back to the sewing hall. I'm glad I kept them. Hurriedly, Cinderella changed into her old working uniform. Then the 4 parted ways, with Cinderella and Bruno heading for the Grand Duke's office. She didn't know what she was looking for, and her pulse thundering in her ears, she rifled through his drawers. There were maps, charts of the lineages of the noble families of Arules, tax reports, and letters from various members of the council, but nothing that suggested he'd been lying to the king. Nothing about burying King George's wish to permit magical persons back into Arules or about poisoning his own sovereign. But as Cinderella looked through the papers, she stopped. She had never seen the Duke's handwriting before, yet it looked familiar. Neat with a careful flourish, and the seal he used on his documents looked like something she had seen before. She frowned, searching her memory. Where, oh where, had she seen it before? She'd been with Louisa sewing. Ah! Digging into her apron, she fumbled for the scraps of paper she had found while helping Louisa mend clothing in the seamstress room. She'd forgotten to toss them away. The seal was the same, the handwriting the same, but where was the rest? "Can you help me find this?" she asked Bruno, letting him sniff the scraps she'd found. After a moment, his nose twitched. Then, nose to the ground, he quickly edged out of the Duke's office toward the bedchambers, where he stopped in front of a wide wooden chest. "In here?" The dog's grunt confirmed the answer to her question. She swung open the Duke's armoire, scouring his clothes until she found a row of hanging trousers, each with identical satin stripes. She started searching through their pockets, but Bruno was faster. He bobbed his nose at a pair at the end of the row, and Cinderella unhooked it from the rack. There. Something crinkled against her fingers. Daring to hope, she pulled it out, and there it was. The rest of the missing page. Piecing the scraps together, she held the papers against the window. "I have a need for a concoction that will cause grievous pain, enough to make one consider stepping down from his responsibilities," she read aloud. She gasped. That was it. Proof that Ferdinand had been poisoning the king. The front door to the Duke's chambers creaked open, and Cinderella quickly stuffed the pages into her pockets. "What do you think you're doing, young lady?" Under the glare of the Duke's attendant, Cinderella shot to her feet, hiding the document behind her back. I'm cleaning his grace's." "What's that in your hand?" "It's nothing." You look familiar. You're..." Before the attendant's suspicion could grow any further, Cinderella dashed out of the Duke's chambers into the hall. She was in such a hurry she didn't look ahead, and she ran straight into the arms of the Grand Duke himself. Chapter 32. "You're a clever one, escaping the royal prison. I'll give you credit for that," said Ferdinand. "But you've made a great mistake returning to this place, to the palace. Your time is up, my child." He clapped, and the guards rounded up on Cinderella. She twisted away from them, holding up the papers she had taken from the Duke's office. These are proof that the Duke is a traitor." The guards hesitated, glancing at the Duke with uncertainty. "You would listen to her lies?" Ferdinand lashed out. "Useless, all of you." He seized her arms, snatching the papers she found, but Bruno snarled, pouncing on the Duke and gnashing ferociously at his legs. The Duke kicked Bruno aside, pushing him toward the guards. He tugged at the collar of his shirt, looking flustered. "Get those papers," he barked at the guards, "and arrest her." Reluctantly, the guards advanced, but Cinderella dug her heels in the carpet, her eyes steely and cool, and daring them to come for her. She held up the papers she found, reading as loudly as she could. "I have a need for a concoction that will cause grievous pain, enough to make one consider—" "Stop her!" Ferdinand shouted. The guards tried to seize her arms, and Cinderella twisted away, bolting for the royal audience chamber. She'd gotten as far as across the portrait gallery. Suddenly, Duchess Genevieve appeared on the other side of the hall. "What is the meaning of this?" Immediately, the guards halted, and the Grand Duke recoiled at the sight of the king's sister. "Stay out of this, Genevieve," he warned her. "The girl is under arrest." "For what crime?" entered a new voice. "Charles!" Cinderella's heart swelled when she saw him emerge beside his aunt. "For what crime, you ask?" Ferdinand blustered. "She's a sorceress, your highness, a danger to the kingdom." "Enough," commanded Charles. "The only danger to the kingdom is you. Come to your senses, your highness. She casts a spell on you. You aren't yourself." The prince wasn't listening anymore. He turned to Cinderella, relief flooding his eyes as he took her hands in his own. "I knew that letter wasn't you, but when I saw the ring inside—" "I wouldn't leave you," she said, her fingers tracing along his palm. I thought you were at the council to announce your betrothal. I couldn't go through with it. Then Aunt Genevieve found me and explained everything. Charles broke his gaze from Cinderella to glare at the Duke. After what you've done to Cinderella, you're a brave man to dare remain in the palace, Ferdinand. To the Duke's credit, he maintained his composure. Magic is forbidden. You know the law, and I know the girl used magic to attend the first ball. Then it's time the law changed, replied the prince. Unfortunately, that is not your decision to make. The Grand Duke waved a familiar scroll, tied with a green ribbon. Your father made me Grand Overseer of Arules. I would check that decree again if I were you, said the Duchess. You'll find that it hasn't been properly signed. Ferdinand frowned as he fumbled at the scroll. He signed the declaration. I saw it with my own eyes. Look again. I convinced George to go along with the plan to bring out your true colors. It wasn't easy given how much he trusts you. Luckily, even after all these years, he still trusts me more. The Duke's eyes bulged, and he looked like he was about to faint. Why, you conniving old witch. I learned from the best, Ferdinand, said Genevieve cheerily. I couldn't very well counsel my brother to entrust the kingdom to you, now could I? Cinderella caught the scroll as it slipped from his fingers. By royal decree, I hereby declare Ferdinand, the Grand Duke of Malloy, Grand Overseer and Counselor Regent of the Kingdom of Arules, until he should see fit to grant full power to my son and heir, Prince Charles. Signed, Cinderella laughed softly. Signed, Grinning Jenny. Ferdinand made a choking sound. I hereby strip you of your lands and titles, said Charles coldly. Ferdinand, you are banished from Arules, never to return. But, Your Highness, Your Majesty, you simply don't understand. I was just trying to protect the kingdom. Charles finished for him by going behind my father's back to seize more power for yourself. Spinning for the door, the Duke tried to flee, but the guards grabbed him by the arms so forcefully that his monocle fell out of his pocket, swinging back and forth. You are about to make a mistake, Ferdinand said, pleadingly. By marrying a servant, you invite war to Arules. The people will never understand. They will never accept her. Cinderella may be a commoner, spoke up the Duchess, but I have no doubt she will make a queen far more worthy and beloved than any you might have chosen. Cinderella stepped forward. I know not everyone will accept me, she said quietly, but I've learned that life isn't perfect. You can't be happy all the time, and I can't expect everyone to love me. But the people are our future. If we don't realize that, if we keep clinging to the past, then Arules will crumble. The doors behind her burst open, and in stormed the king, still in his pajamas. Where is the traitor? He rasped. Shadows hooded King George's eyes, and his voice was barely louder than a whisper. In spite of it all, his energy had not dimmed, and as he shook his fist at the Grand Duke, 2 attendants scurried after him. Father, what are you doing here? You should rest. Bah, rest? When my sister tells me that this scoundrel has been poisoning me? King George ignored his son's entreaties and set his gaze on the Duke. How could you, Ferdinand? Poison, really? The Grand Duke cringed. Your Majesty, there, allow me to explain. What's there to explain? Charles seethed, clenching his fist. You tried to kill the king. There had better be an antidote. The king's guards began to search the Duke, but he twisted in their grasp. I can obtain the antidote for you, he stuttered, but perhaps an act of clemency might be in order first. Sire, after all, it was all in good measure, and no one was harmed. Bruno pounced on the Duke, tearing at his pockets. A vial tumbled out, landing on the soft carpet, along with a crumbled piece of parchment. That's it, sire, the antidote. You see it was harmless, truly. I didn't mean for it to go so far. Lock him up, King George ordered the guards. I never want to see him again. But, sire, and throw away the key. The king turned his back to Ferdinand, a deep frown setting on his face until the guards dragged the Grand Duke out of sight. Then King George sniffled, blowing his nose into a handkerchief. I thought of him as a friend, you know. He wasn't always so terrible. People change, said Genevieve, patting her brother's shoulders. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. He wanted to protect the kingdom, added Cinderella gently. She picked up the vial along with the parchment that had slipped out of the Duke's pocket and handed them both to the king. Sometimes even the wickedest deeds begin with good intentions. Could the same be said about her stepmother? Cinderella realized she no longer needed to find out, and that was probably for the best. Still clenching the antidote tight in his fist, the king drank it all in one gulp and made a face. Cinderella wasn't the only one holding her breath as she watched the king. Slowly but surely, the pallor in his skin faded, and a slight flush returned to his cheeks. He let out a deep breath. "And you, young lady," he gestured to Cinderella, "it's high time we were properly introduced." "Meeting your future daughter-in-law while still in your sleeping clothes, George," said Genevieve, "and in the presence of a traitor? How unceremonious." "Better here than risk her running away again. No glass slippers on you this time, hey?" Cinderella couldn't help laughing. "No, your majesty, I won't run away, not ever again." "Glad to hear it. It's an unbecoming trait in anyone, let alone a princess, having the entire kingdom search for you with nothing other than a glass shoe." The king chuckled. "That will be a story for the ages." At the mention of magic, Cinderella's laughter faded. "The Grand Duke was right about me using magic, sire. I'm not a sorceress, but my fairy godmother gave me the dress and the glass slippers to attend the ball. She's the kindest person, and it would mean the world to her and to me if you would allow magic in Arules again." Bewilderment came over the king's face. "Allow magic? I already cleared this up with Ferdinand." His voice drifted as he unfurled the crumpled paper. "My proclamation. I gave this to Ferdinand this morning to present it to the council." "It looks like he never intended to share it," said Genevieve. "Remind me to add another 20 years to the Duke's time in prison," mumbled King George. He cleared his throat, turning to Charles. "I believe I left Arules in your charge. It's up to you, my boy." Charles took Cinderella's hand. "It's up to us," he said, "by royal decree. All persons of magical talent are hereby welcomed once more in Arules." As soon as the words left his lips, a halo of glittering lights appeared in the hall. All present watched in amazement as Lenora materialized before them, her hands clasped at her chest and her dark eyes glittering with tears. She wasn't the only one. The Duchess's eyes were misty too, and it took Cinderella a moment to realize why. "Your Majesty, your Highness Charles," Cinderella gestured, "allow me to introduce you to my fairy godmother." "It is our good fortune to finally meet you," the Duchess spoke first. Her words came out thick and hoarse, and she sniffed before clearing her throat. "My husband would have been happy to see this day." Lenora clasped the Duchess's hands. "I remember your husband well, Genevieve. I wish I could have thanked him for his many kindnesses to my friends, and for the sacrifices he made so this day could finally come. I wish we could have done more. For too long, Arules cast your people away. Magic has nearly been forgotten, and for that I am truly sorry." "Now that isn't true," soothed the fairy godmother, letting go of Genevieve's hands to circle the small crowd. "What is magic if not a little miracle? Those come in all shapes and sizes every day, with or without my help, in the form of love and joy most often, but in other forms too. Magic only makes the miracles come faster." Lenora placed her hand on Cinderella's arm. "And what a miracle you've fashioned for us all, my dear child. I wanted to help you find your happily ever after, but it is you who has helped me." "I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you have done for me," replied Cinderella. "Magic is welcome again in Arules, and it always will be." Wiping away her tears with her sleeve, the fairy godmother bounced back onto her heels, then gave Prince Charles a stern look. "Well, young man, are you going to hold that slipper all day long?" "Pardon?" Startled, Charles looked down and found Cinderella's glass slipper on his palm. "If I recall, you were going to give it back to her at the ball. This is as good a time as any, after all." Extending his arm to help Cinderella keep her balance, Charles knelt, tilting the slipper toward her foot. It was a perfect fit. But where is the other slipper? Asked the king. It's gone, said Cinderella softly. I had to. Say no more, Lenora winked. At the wave of her wand, the missing slipper appeared on Cinderella's foot, and a gentle rush of wind swept across the palace. When Cinderella blinked next, pink and white roses decorated the hall on white trellises. And not just inside the palace, but outside as well. Everywhere she looked, pink and white roses bloomed across the kingdom. An early wedding present, said the fairy godmother triumphantly. The king leaned out the window, inhaling the fresh air. With a happy sigh, he looked up at his sister. Seems like I've left the kingdom in good hands, doesn't it? It's high time I retire to the country, or... What do you say to a visit in Orleans? I'll give you 3 weeks before you come running back to Valoris, said Genevieve. I know you, George. You won't be able to stay away from the palace, especially if there are grandchildren in your future. A deep blush reddened Cinderella and the prince's cheeks. You're in the business of granting wishes, aren't you? The king asked, nudging Lenore, a joking gleam in his eye. Make sure these two continue the royal line. There's plenty of space on the palace walls for portraits and 10 grandchildren or more. For goodness sakes, George, scolded Genevieve. Let's get on with the wedding first. At this rate, you're going to frighten the poor girl away. No, she's here to stay, I can tell. The king cocked his head at his son and Cinderella, who were by the window, murmuring with their heads close. Oblivious, the couple shared a tender kiss. As Cinderella's heart swelled with happiness, a burst of rose petals swelled up from the gardens and danced into the sky, a celebration of magic, love, and hope. She touched her forehead to Charles's, both of them smiling at the sight. By the end of the day, all of Arula's would know that the prince had finally found his princess, and that magic had returned to the country. The next week, Cinderella and Prince Charles were married. It was a magnificent affair. Cinderella wore a lustrous white gown, sewn by none other than Louisa and her mother, that went beautifully with her sparkling glass slippers. Duchess Genevieve walked her down the aisle, and Bruno proudly bore the ring, balancing on a velvet cushion on his head. Out of the goodness of her heart, Cinderella even invited Lady Tremaine and her stepsisters to the wedding. She didn't want the happiest day of her life to be marred by any bitter feelings towards her stepmother. Though Lady Tremaine did not attend, Anastasia and Drusilla did, and over the years, Cinderella and her stepsisters developed a civil, if not warm, relationship. The king never did retire to his estate in the countryside, but instead, he relished his new freedom by visiting Genevieve in Orleans and traveling to Arles incognito, often borrowing his son's university jacket during his stolen evenings out, even though it was too large for him. It was far too large for him. Magic returned to Arles, fairy godparents bringing hope and little miracles to those in need of it, and the Grand Duke of Malloy was exiled far from the kingdom, never to be seen again. King George and Genevieve took over the Duke's former quarters, using it as an office to help newly reinstated magical beings return to Arles, while Cinderella and Charles dismantled the council, putting in its place an assembly of forward-thinking men and women, regardless of rank and wealth, to advise them as they ruled the country. The story of Cinderella and her glass slipper had spread far and wide, and many wished to hear it from her own lips. But as she and the prince traveled to far corners of the world, recounting how they'd met and come to fall in love, they emphasized that their story didn't end with the glass slipper being found and returned to Cinderella. No, their fairy tale continued on, with each day together and later with their children. As for the glass slippers, Cinderella and Charles kept them displayed in the garden for all to see, as a reminder that magic, as wonderful as it could be, was never the key to making one's dreams come true or making one happy. After all, spells were fragile, hopes could shatter, and dreams could stay dreams, never given a chance to take wing. If one looked very carefully, sewn onto the cushion upon which the slipper stood was the word for what Cinderella and the prince found to be even greater than magic, then dreams, then happily ever afters, then even hope. It was love. that is the end of the story, guys. If you're just catching this little part of it, please go back and start on part 1. It's a good story, but I'm tooting my own horn because I love Disney. I'm a Disney person, and these books, I don't know, they're just something different. You know, we grew up with Disney one way, and this kind of just gives us a different version of what things could be. So, I don't know. I'm rambling, and then I just sound silly. You know me, if you watch my channel, I'm just Chatty Cathy, and I'm always a hot mess. So, if you did like it, please like, if you would, and then comment. Let me know what you thought about it. I will be doing another book. I don't know what one it will be or how soon, but I will definitely do another one because I enjoyed this. So if you haven't already and you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe to my channel. You're more than welcome to be a part of my family, my YouTube family. And without you guys, my channel wouldn't be what it is. So I thank each and every one of you, and I hope you guys have a blessed morning, day, evening, night, wherever you are listening to this from. All right. Talk to you guys later. Have a blessed day. Bye.